Hey everybody, Dark Committee here from Split Polygon, and welcome back to our environment creation with Arnold and Megascans. So in the last chapter we left off with setting up a displacement on a plane, and we have our little box for human scale, and today we're going to try to do something fun about it and a bit more interesting. So looking at this HDRI, I actually got inspired by it. So as you can see, you have like the water coming in and then the beach going, gradually going higher up. So if I rotate it around, as you see, it has like a slope. And then the sand we have right now actually starts right around here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take kind of like this little hill over here that you can see and kind of make it maybe bigger. So our camera, if you imagine, would be somewhere around here already in this messy sand, looking up this grassy hill thingy. So we're gonna see what's gonna what we're gonna come up with, but that's the idea. Anyway, I'm gonna move this guy back, and I'm gonna do like a basic modeling here. Now, when I'm doing the modeling, probably gonna distort the geometry, which means we're gonna distort the UVs. So we're gonna look at ways to fix that as well. So I'm just gonna grab this, move it up, and actually let's move up a little further back because we don't need to see on the back side. Alright, so maybe we can take, and I'm using soft selection, by the way, so I'm pressing B on the keyboard and that activates soft selection. And if you click and hold B and you left click move left or right, you're gonna change the radius. So I'm gonna maybe flatten some of this, and let's see how that looks from a human point of view. Not too bad. Now we could do some more advanced techniques like mixing a couple of different sand textures, but I don't want to overwhelm you guys, in this little course with how to texture stuff in Mari or Substance, or this is meant to be more of an entry-level kind of course. So maybe what we can do is grab our sculpt tool and sculpt a little bit more details. So if you see over here, like anywhere you have like a grassy hill, they kind of go over, and you have like a little sharper geometry. So maybe I can take this, actually instead of subdividing it here, I can just add a smooth node. So I'm going to smooth it once. So that's going to give me a little bit more control. Maybe we can dig this a little bit. I'm going to grab my pen and just sculpt on my tablet instead of with the mouse. It's going to be a lot easier. So I'm going to do that, and maybe switch to just a basic standard mode. So if I go to Shift right click and I grab my sculpt brush and then hold B to change the radius, then I can do something like this. Alrighty, so we need to kind of figure out camera position and how we want to frame the shot. So let's just introduce some variation in the surface, so not everything is just perfectly round like a computer generated plane, for example. Not round but flat, I meant. Alrighty, and maybe let's get like a path, like somebody was walking in here, and it's kind of a little bit of a divot in the ground, but not like necessarily looking exactly like path, but just an indication of it. Alrighty, so we need to figure out the camera lens we're going to use and what we want to achieve with this thing. So maybe I'm gonna grab my grab brush now instead and start moving some of this up to get more of a custom feel to it. And I'm gonna hold shift to smooth some of these edges that are being pulled and distorted a little bit too much for my liking. So I'm just gonna try to make something more interesting. Maybe I should have like sped this up or just skipped, because it may be boring for some of you guys. But I just wanted to show what it kind of takes and like what's the approach that I have for this kind of stuff. And then if I need to do a little bit more sculpting, I'll maybe either do a time lapse or skip it. But for the first initial tests, I'm gonna try and do everything real time. All right, that kind of looks like something. All right, so we don't have any assets, we don't have any grasses or anything like that. So first, I'm gonna grab my cube and gonna frame my camera around it, and then I'm gonna hide it. So right now, if I select my camera, it's a 35mm lens camera, and what I can do is maybe switch it to 50. So 50mm lens camera. And very important when you're framing shot for rendering is it's not what you see in the viewport that is going to get rendered, but actually what's in the frame of the shot. So you need to activate your gate, and that's going to show you exactly what you're going to render. One thing you can also do is you can select your camera and go to environment, sorry, display options, not environment. And you have gate opacity and gate mask color. Opacity, I'm going to crank it up to 1. All that's going to do is going to make the surrounding space between the actual renderable shot and the rest of the viewport opaque, so you don't see anything. And I sometimes make it black just to kind of have a little bit more clear indication that this is actually non-renderable area. And then you have the overscan that will control how big this is in the viewport. That will not change the renderable area, but it will change how much of the renderable area you see in the viewport. So this is dependent on your monitor and on what menu you have open. So if you have like a very large monitor, you know, you can just maybe if you hold control and click inside, this is doing like a 2D pan zoom thingy where it just zooms in the frame of the camera. All right, so I don't know, where's my light coming from? It's from behind. I might want to change that and switch it from the side view so we can have a bit more interesting composition. And then maybe now that my camera is low, I can just modify some of this terrain. All right, let's start rendering, and then we're gonna figure out what we want to do with this. So I'm gonna save, and then I'm gonna press render. This is gonna load the scene into memory, and it's gonna start the rendering process. All right, so that is rendering. So as you're going to see, where we stretched our plane, our texture is being stretched, and we have our footsteps going all the way up, which is not very realistic. So we may need to adjust some of this. The displacement looks a little bit too high for a camera being this close to the ground, which means the intensity of our displacement can be toned down. So let's do that as a starting point. Let's grab our displacement shader and maybe drop this to 0.005 instead. And here's something about Arnold. Arnold will try to cache in the scene. So if you have any big changes to your geometry, or if you're showing or hiding stuff, or you're adjusting displacement in this instance, it will try to force itself to update the entire scene, but sometimes it will not. It will just render just to be efficient. So you need to go and go to render, update full scene. If you're changing displacement parameters but you don't see the results, then you need to update your full scene. Now here's something we did. We've updated the geometry, meaning we smoothed it out. We added more geometry. We added 4 times the polygons that we had, but we didn't adjust the subdivision that comes from Arnold. That means that this 6 is still being applied on top of those 4 subdivisions that we did in the viewport. So now we have a lot more subdivisions that we had before. So that's why some of the changes will take longer to update. So to be efficient, I'm going to drop this down to 3 now, and then maybe for a bit more final quality, I can bump it up to 4 or 5. All right, and then we need to figure out if the scale of the sand is correct. Now, for me, what I usually do is I would take a human base mesh and I would place it in the scene, and I would kind of see the size of the foot and try to measure it like that. If my human foot can walk on the beach, if the scale of the little tiny rocks and everything is correct based on that. Or you can use some other objects to kind of be your guide. So I'm gonna pause the render, save my scene, and I'm gonna jump back to bridge. And I downloaded a couple of sand rocks and logs and stuff like that. So I'm gonna start bringing some more assets to Maya. And let's see, I'm gonna bring this rock first. This is supposed to be like a big rock, I think. So I'm gonna, yeah, I'm gonna grab this one and maybe bring it closer to my camera. Now here's something, whenever you bring assets from Megascans, like 90% of the time, if you don't uncheck it yourself, it's gonna have subdivision applied. If your object is right close to the camera, you may want to leave that. But whenever I start, I just disable this subdivision, and I only enable it if I really need to, because if this rock was like right over here, then it would make sense. But if I place it like behind the first dune, maybe like around there or something, then the details in the mesh already and the details on the textures is going to be enough to sell it, so you can save yourself a little bit of render time. So I have no idea actually how this is positioned because I'm not seeing it with a texture, so might want to do a render, and we're going to convert again. Anytime you bring new assets that has textures, they're gonna be converted before we go into rendering. All right, so that is our rock, and we're gonna rearrange them these guys later. And now first I'm gonna go and see what I have, if I need to download anything else. This looks interesting. This is beach log. Perfect. Send to Maya. And we may need some grass, like as on that little reference from the HDRI. There's actually grass on the hill, so maybe a good idea to kind of start adding some grass on top of this. So I'm gonna see where can I place these guys to make interesting composition, and then maybe we can look into adding some grass elements and maybe adjusting our camera and our lighting to make a appealing looking render. Alright, so I'm just gonna frame it kind of like this. I'm gonna do another render just to convert the textures for this guy. I'm not really worried about the composition just yet. I'm just gonna see what assets do I have to bring in to kind of like make the scene. Right now it's a little bit hard to kind of judge the scale of the sand in the dune and everything, so I need more assets to kind of lead my eye and tell me how big things are in comparison. Alright, that doesn't look that bad actually. So let's say lemongrass. I don't think you can find lemongrass on the beach, but you may get away with it because the grass is going to be a little bit further away. So we may actually get away with having. It would be interesting actually to have some sort of element like this, maybe in the distance or maybe like buried in the sand. I'm gonna think about that actually. And I don't think, oh, actually I can grab some maybe little rocks, pebbles, and these branches are kind of like forest branch, so that wouldn't necessarily fit away. I'm trying to see if I already have assets that I purchased. These actually, these guys, these would do because these are coastal, so that would actually be perfect. So is it still downloading? Yes. Okay, well, leave it to download. Didn't I get a palm tree? I forgot. Maybe I forgot to download a palm tree. So I'm going to say tree. And I'm going to click on the search. 3D assets. Thank you very much. And let's see. This would be nice, palm tree trunk. Or maybe something more. Is this the same one, just rotated, or is it two different ones? It looks like it's two different ones, actually. Some of these would be nice to have. So again, this is 4 points, 8K texture, offline metalness, LUD 2. LUD 2 is fine. I'm not going to place this right up next to the camera, so I don't need to be massively detailed scan. And if I do need details, I can activate displacement. Yeah, something like this I was thinking when I saw that concrete. It like has like an object buried in the sand a little bit. That would be fun to do. Alrighty, so let's see. This actually might be the exact same one, but just rotated because I can see all of them are rendered from two different angles. So the question is, do I want some more rugged one or more regular? Actually, I'm gonna get this guy in Maya first and see, kind of like plan before, because this actually costs points. Like if buying them actually, well, downloading them, you're actually buying them for points that you purchase. So I just don't want to buy a bunch of stuff without thinking and then hope that they're gonna work. So it would be a good idea to kind of plan a little bit my composition before I go and buy a bunch of stuff that I will never use. Alright, so let's see what we can do about this. How far is this from our actual ridge? We're actually quite far away. I wonder if we need to go a little bit closer. Here's the thing, because we have a flat lens, we have like 50mm lens, like this looks very close to the camera. If I select the camera and I say 24, for example, this is going to get very far away. So it depends on the look we're after. We could go with a wider lens or a bit flatter lens. So let's try the wider lens and bring all of these assets closer and maybe find a interesting composition. Something like that. and then maybe start to bring some of these back and placing them where they would make sense. So and we can modify the terrain as well to fit some of these assets, so it's not like we've sculpted it and that's it, job done, move on. So I'm just gonna scatter them around like this, and I'm gonna save and do another render. And the good thing about this HDRI that I have is already has a very nice sky that I can use as a replacement for a matte painting, because I don't have a matte painting for a sky that you would usually have for a shot like this. So it's actually an interesting kind of, yeah, as you can actually see some of the water. So maybe that's a good idea to position the camera with the render active, just so we can have some interesting sky as well. And maybe we can grab our HDRI and go to the channel box, select rotate Y, and middle click in the viewport and start rotating. Now it wouldn't make sense for the ocean to be on this side of the beach, so we would actually need to swing it around and have something else in the background. And we don't have to keep this as our matte painting, as long as our lighting matches. Now, something that I really like about this HDRI is how neutral the sand is. It's not so yellow as this one. So something we can do is color correct this thing to be a little bit more desaturated. Oh, I think I went below the ground. Yeah. All right. That looks kind of cool, I think. Yeah, I can see a little bit of water. Yeah, and we're gonna probably adjust this a lot when we go to final rendering. But for now, I'm gonna select the camera. I'm gonna lock it so I can't move it anymore. And I'm gonna start playing around with some of these assets. I'm gonna pause the render and maybe start placing these. So if this was here, and we can have some of these rocks. And I'm gonna try to do like a little bit of more close-up over render, so I might do like an activate like the depth of field and kind of like diffuse and like defocus, not diffuse, the background, so we don't have to worry about making a proper matte paint, because that would be a little bit more advanced than what I'm trying to do here. I try not to overwhelm you guys with too much information. Maybe we can adjust some of the terrain to have like a leading point towards that hill, and maybe we can modify the hill a little bit actually, so you know, it kind of has like a focal point. This guy is floating right now, so we're gonna need to sculpt some of that geometry around it. Oops. To ground it a little bit. This rock looks a little bit out of place, to be honest. So I'm just going to move it further back for now, and I'm going to find a better spot for it later. And you can actually press 6 on the keyboard and, you know, see these guys textured if you really want to. but I don't mind actually working with the gray. It gives your viewport a little bit more time to catch up, and it's a little bit more responsive. All right, let's see what we have right now. Right, not too bad, not too bad. Now, something that is bugging me is obvious that this sand is a little bit too yellow compared to this assets. So I'm gonna actually desaturate it a little bit. So the way I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna open up our Hypershade, graph our sand material, and let's see, we have displacement map, which is all good. I'm gonna bring this down actually. I'm gonna rearrange this so I know what node goes where. So we have some utility nodes between this and the map and the shader already, but we don't have a utility for the diffuse or the albedo. So I'm gonna press tab and I'm gonna type AI color correct. And I'm gonna drag the out color. I'm gonna click on the green dot. It's going to make a line without letting go. I'm going to drop it on the input, and out color will go to the base color. Now this node is in between, but it doesn't do anything yet. And I'm actually going to disable these. I don't need this. So I can select the node, open up the attribute editor, save my scene, and get my render view going. So I can start rendering, and saturation I can say 0.9. 0.8. There we go. Now this one is getting a little bit yellowy, and this one is a little bit has a little bit more blue-green to it. So maybe we can shift the hue on this guy, not that much. This is very sensitive, so small values make big difference, especially if you have the saturation lowered. So 0.01, 0.02. All right. That's a little bit better. Maybe it's a little bit too much actually. 1, 2. And maybe we can bring back some of the saturation, 0.85. Right, not too bad, not too bad. And these guys already integrate very nicely. See, as soon as you bury them in the sand, they just look like they're part of it. So you can adjust the color of these as well if you feel like it. But yeah, already looking pretty good. So now we can think about placing a palm tree or something like that, or maybe a grass on the hill. So let's search for some assets. So let's see what I have purchased already. 3D plants. All right. So I have herbs, weed, houseplant. I don't know if that can grow on the beach, but I'm not gonna be too picky about this one, to be honest. Dune. Let's see, what is this one? And that's actually probably gonna look good. All right, 8K. I don't think 8K is needed for this kind of plant, to be honest. 4K is gonna be, plenty. Going to go to export settings, lot 0. Lot 0 could be quite heavy, and this grass is gonna be a bit further away from the camera, so maybe we can go to lot 1 for now. And let's see. Okay, I'm gonna export this. And we can use some mesh to scatter things around, or maybe just hand place them if we don't want to do like a big hill of grass. Alright, so I'm gonna go to my, actually this is my perspective view, so I'm gonna go and make a new. We're gonna see our grass is all there, so I'm gonna group the grass so it's in one group. So I'm gonna call it grass 01, just so I know what it's doing. And looks like I have some keyframes on the plane which I don't need, so I'm gonna break the connection. And let's click 6 to preview this. It's gonna take a little bit of time to catch up, and some of the opacity doesn't show great in the viewport, so that's no biggie. Alrighty, so let's do some mashing. I'm gonna check if the pivot is in the right spot. It is. Thank you, Quixel. So we're gonna switch to animation. I'm gonna go to mesh and open up mesh editor. And now you can go to mesh, create mesh network. I'm gonna reset the settings. I'm gonna pick instance. Distribution type is not really important because we're gonna change it anyway. Click apply and close. So now we have instances. I'm gonna make this and call it ground, and the cube is my scale ref, and these are the rocks and the logs we have, so that's all good. All right, so first thing we need to do is we need to tell mesh that we want this to be scattered on the plane itself. So we're gonna open up attribute editor, select mesh, and select the distribute node and change it to mesh, and it's going to ask for input mesh, and we're going to middle click the ground, place it in there, and it's going to start populating it all over the place. As you can see, if I click the distribute node and if I change the number of points to 1000, we get 1000 blades of grass. But the problem is they're all the same grass, and we had multiples as you saw there. So right now, if you see, they look all exactly the same. That's no. So what we can do is we can click on the plus and we can click ID, and this is going to count these blades in the group, and in the ID is going to put that number. So we have 10 different types of grass, and now there are 10 different types of grass. How convenient. All right. So what else we want? Well, I don't want to have grass all over. I want to have grass maybe on this hill and kind of fade away. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can put place nodes. You can put we can paint maps as well. So maybe we can do something like that. That's going to be a little bit more advanced, but I think you guys are ready to show you this. So I'm going to disable mesh for now, and we're going to use Maya's painting tools because I don't want to introduce new software and tell you how to export and do UVs and a bunch of crazy stuff. So we're gonna graph our Lambert material and we're gonna assign it to our plane. All right, and I'm gonna save this. So first thing I'm gonna do and go to the rendering section. We can move this guy out of the way. Go to texturing, 3D paint tool, and open the option box. So if you try to paint, it's going to tell you a big X saying, no bro, you can't paint. Why I can't paint? Because I don't have a texture assigned to this plane. If you look at the shader, not the render view, if you look at the shader, there's nothing connected to it. So if you scroll down into the paint tool, you have the ability to assign new or edit textures. So I'm going to click assign edit, and I'm going to pick 4096. This is going to be plenty of resolution because that's just a mask. The type, maybe TIFF is going to be fine. Background color black, that's all good. Assign or edit texture. So that's going to assign the texture to it, and now my cursor allows me to paint. So I want to have no grass apart from this area. So I'm going to take the color, switch it to black, and click flood paint. That's going to make Oh, sorry. The flood color also needs to be black. This is for painting, it's for flooding. So flood paint, that's gonna flood everything with black. Now I'm gonna take my wireframe, click it just so I can see where my sculptural details are. And I'm gonna make the color for painting white. And I'm gonna paint. So I'm gonna go around. I'm going to try not to paint over the edges too much because the grass is going to start to grow on the normals and that's going to start to look a little weird. So I'm just going to cover a larger area with a bigger brush. Alright, we're never going to see behind that much, so I'm not going to make a big area out of it. Maybe we can have a couple of grass blades here and there to kind of break things up. And if you want, if you click this folder icon, it's going to bring you to a location where your Maya is installed, and it has some bunch of presets of alphas that you can use. So this is just a good way to kind of break things up a little bit, so not everything has this perfect feel to it. So I'm just going to break some of these edges up. Alrighty, and I'm painting with the mouse, as you can see, because I'm too lazy to pick up the pen. Right, I'm going to switch this back to black, and I'm going to eat away some of this so I can break it up even more. Maybe have like a patch where there's no grass there, and maybe I can like get like a soft gradient with like a 0.5 just to kind of introduce a little bit of a gradient where there's just a few blades of grass here and there, but nothing major, so it doesn't like grow and then stop immediately. And maybe make it a little bit brighter and kind of blend over. And you can obviously spend as much time as you want. I'm doing a very bad job just for the sake of the tutorial. I don't want to watch. I want you to watch me paint a mask for 2.5 hours, because it could take 2.5 hours, to be honest. Sometimes, if you have a very specific thing, you need to like render and check and render and check. And a good idea would actually be to maybe try introduce some grass close to camera, maybe like going like leading towards that edge, that hill, I wanted to say. Maybe you have, you know, a couple of places where grass starts to grow. And we need to check this from camera because we may not see any of this. So yeah, you can kind of see it's a little bit over here, but if I paint anything outside of this, it's not really going to be too beneficial for us. So alright, I'm going to call this done. So before you do anything, before you click away of this tool, make sure you go down and you click Save Texture, because if you don't, you're going to lose everything you did. Alright, make sure you click Save Texture and do it multiple times if you need it. Alright, so I'm gonna go back to my perspective 1. Now this is painted. How can we use it in Mesh? Well, there are a few steps we need to do to make that work. First is we need to get this plugged into Mesh. So I'm going to enable Mesh. I'm going to take this and move it out of the way in my second monitor. Alright, so we have our grass everywhere now. Now I'm going to go click on the plus and choose visibility. So visibility node will say, okay, you can put a strength map. Well, that's self-explanatory. Take the map, middle click, drag it, and put it in here. And as soon as you do that, it's going to start to populate this area and cut away from a different area. Sometimes it will give you an error saying the map needs a helper, and that is this section over here saying map helper. So if it give you that error, it depends on the version of Mesh and Maya you are using. Sometimes you need to plug in your geometry into the mesh helper. So you can grab your ground and just drop it in here. It didn't ask me because I guess 2020.2 they fixed this, but it used to be a problem if you're on 2018 or something like that. It would actually not recognize that mesh is being generated on the mesh, and it will actually ask you for it. And also the map type is automatically set to UVs. It won't be if you're using 2018 or lower, so just make sure you switch it to UV and you plug this, and that will work. All right. Now we need more resolution, so maybe instead of 1000 we can do 5000. All right, let's see from the camera. All right, maybe do 9000. All right, starting to look pretty good. Now they're kind of uniform, which I'm not a big fan of, to be honest, so I can click on the plus again and add a random node, and that's going to shift them slightly. And we can tweak that. Let's see, perspective 1. Let's go in there and see what it's doing. So position, it's gonna start to shift them around a little bit. I don't want them to shift in y-axis, so I'm just gonna disable that. I don't want them to go up and down. Z and X, that's fine if they move a little bit. Scale, you can click uniform and scale them like that if you want to. Random seed will give you random randomness. And then the strength of the node can be changed over here. All right, that doesn't look too bad actually. So we have a lot of these that we don't really see. So what we can do is, if we want to, we can modify the terrain, and these should follow because they are bound to a vertex level. So if we move some of this thing up, let's check from camera point of view, that is very low. So if you move these guys up and move these guys up and maybe these guys up, and maybe grab some of these and drop it down. All right, let's see what we did and how this looks at render time. Open up Arnold render view. This is where we left off. Now it's going to convert the textures and it's going to load all of these guys. And one thing I forgot to do is disable displacement on the plants, and we'll try to displace them now. So they may look wonky or they may straight up explode, but let's see. Let's see what Arnold gifts us. So here we have our grass, but one thing we forgot to do is reassign the shader once we've painted the map. So don't forget to do that. Don't do what I do, do what I say. Alright, so I'm going to bring in the Hypershade, find my sand material. I'm going to make actually a new tab and graph the sand material, and it's selected. apply it. Great. Now let's re-render. Much better. Now this grass looks, pardon me, looks very dark. So looks like we can do a little bit of tweaking and make it look nicer. Let's see why is that first of all. So I'm gonna switch this to perspective 1, the render, and I'm gonna zoom in on one of these guys and see what's going on. Is it a texture missing or is it something else? No, looks like the texture is there. It's just very dark. All right, I'm gonna pause the render, zoom in right in on one of those plants and see what it looks like. All right, that texture looks extremely dark for some reason. Let's check it out. So we're gonna grab one of these grass plates, make a new tab, and graph this guy. All right. First of all, we don't need a displacement map. Nuke that. Second of all, I'm gonna select all of these guys one by one. Go to shape node, capital Clark, switch it to none. I should make a script for this so I don't have to do it for every single object I bring in. Or I should just configure my bridge that doesn't send displacement. That's also an option. But sometimes I do need it, so it's kind of a tricky balance. What do you do? What do you use more? So luckily there's just a few more of these. There's not too much, so it's no big deal. There we go. They're all done now. Now let's check the shader graph. So we have a shader and we have a bunch of maps which do something. Let's see what. Alright, so we have the albedo, which is the color that goes to the base color. That's fine. Roughness goes to roughness. Translucency going to subsurface color. That's interesting. And we have opacity, which is cutting away the shape. Let's start the render view and check some of these maps individually. Alright, so I'm gonna open the shader on the side, go to subsurface and see what we have. So first thing to do to mention is if you have your subsurface weight set to 1, this is essentially overriding the diffuse section completely. All right. So if I switch this off, now you see the color that is being plugged in here. So the translucency map, the way this is configured is a translucency map being plugged into the subsurface color is overriding our texture, and that's why they were black. Now these plants are going to be very far away. If I was like right in here, I might want to add some SSS and make them look like translucent and all that good stuff, but because they're so far away, I'm not gonna bother with that, to be honest. So let's switch the camera to our perspective camera and see how they look like. Not too bad, actually. We need more density, I think, and a little bit more randomness. And I want to remove some of these guys because they're sticking in the wrong direction. But it doesn't look terribly bad. I like this one being behind the log, so I might actually paint some grass here and there to kind of make this scene more interesting. So with that being said, I'm gonna disable mesh again, close the render view, and switch back to Lambert 1. assign it. Press 6 on the keyboard to see it. And grab my 3D paint tool again. And I can continue to paint, which is very, very nice. So I can paint some white around here, maybe a little clump over there. I can maybe grab this area. Actually, I don't want to go below the surface, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to paint around it instead. And I don't see the back side of this from camera, so I might want to just paint around here. Maybe like a little streak over here. And maybe exaggerate some of these guys because they were very tiny and there was not a lot of grass, so maybe I need to push this a little bit more. So this is pretty much the process, guys, for making these kind of environments. You test it out, you see how it looks, you add a bunch more stuff, you correct your masks, you update your scattering stuff, whatever you're scattering, and you keep going and going until you're satisfied. That's the big secret to this. There's no real secret, is it? Let me actually bring in the render view again and see which ones. These were actually okay. These ones I didn't like. Okay, so I don't have to go. Actually, I might get away from the edge just a bit. And because we don't see too much of this, I'm gonna paint with black, so I don't have to scatter more points that I see from camera. If you had like a moving camera and you want to see more of it, then by any means, but I don't think I will. Let's see from perspective. Oh, actually I do see this edge a little bit. Okay, my bad. Course correct. Add that back in. I did raise the geometry, so I do see more of it than I used to. Just add a bit more white to this area, maybe connect it a little bit more, just patchy here and there. We add along the base grass blade here and there. And maybe add a few more random ones. All right, go back, save the texture again. As soon as you save this texture, it should already go through the triple switch and update this guy, and this guy is plugged into mesh, so if my theory is correct, our scattering will update automatically. Look at that. So that is pretty cool. So I'm gonna grab my plane, go back, assign my sand shader again, and go back to my perspective, which I should probably rename, and see what we did. All right, that is starting to look pretty nice. So I'm gonna stop this lesson here. In the next one, we're gonna see how we can randomize some of these, add maybe more stuff, add some depth of field, and maybe finalize the scene. So yeah, see you guys in the next one. I hope you're learning and you like what you see, and I'll see you in the next one. Yeah, bye.